The black man is God.
There is no criterion for the current hip-hop culture, so anybody can jump in, get in front of a microphone and say, yo, I'm a rapper, I'm hip-hop, which then becomes part of the reputation of Black America.
White people always had, from then to now, an appetite for particular constructions of blackness. The pantsy, the bully coon, and the Jezebel.
How does the black woman see herself? Because now the correlation is that she believes she is God, a step above the black man, right? In the way that he calls himself a God.
The father of the Annunaki, that Sumerian word An is a Sumerianization of the global name Allah.
It's 19 keys.
19 keys.
I appreciate my pops for teaching me how to be a guy.
From a boy to a man, and ultimately back into the natural state of being into a God.
As guys, we're supposed to always move with that higher self. I had to be able to execute it. Having knowledge is not power. The execution of knowledge is power. Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. Because the only real knowledge you can get is knowledge of self.
The highest level is ownership. The highest level is power. The highest level is sovereignty. The highest level is higher consciousness. The highest level is when we own our own culture.
Excellence at a very high level. Not eye level. A high level.
It's time for a high level conversation.
We're here for another high level conversation.
19 keys, and this is a high level conversation. Tap in with the God.
Peace, family. Welcome back to another high-level conversation. Today, I want you to forget what you think you know, particularly upon the subject of the Anunnaki and ancient Sumeria. And I want you to be open to a dialogue that maybe just some of the information that you've gotten were possible misinterpretations, incorrect decodings, right? And part of the imagination of those who've gotten information and supplied the world with what I would say is partially their poetic license. Today, I have somebody that I'm going to read directly from his book, going into the first chapter, and we're going to get into this subject, a subject that has become very famous, especially across the internet today. As somebody who's recently been, I wouldn't say attacked, but represented as an influence of Black America in media by the Oxy report that says that sometimes Black platforms represent a revisionist history. Now, they couldn't tell us what history, because then we have to get into debate of detail, right? And then they don't want to get there. So they'd rather throw these general titles. The reason that I'm having part 2 of a conversation with the scholar that I have on today is because he challenges people that if you have something that you think is wrong in my book or in my work, bring it to the table and we can deal with it. Otherwise, be satisfied with the facts and the truth that have been presented, and let this be your superior truth that you now move upon. So today we're going to get into first starting off with the Anunnaki. So let me, if I will, read this first chapter. Sumer is the name of the ancient Mesopotamian civilization that preceded the Akkadian and Babylonian civilizations of the area now called Iraq. It is believed by many scholars to be the oldest civilization. Others contend that such honor should be given to Kemet, or ancient Egypt. I will not engage in that debate here, except to point out that both civilizations, at least in part, derived from or were influenced by earlier civilizations of Afrabia, otherwise Black Arabia. However, I will point out that Sumer was a Black civilization. Now, because he's been here already, and some of you all may be new, but this is by the good God, the good brother, my brother, Dr. Wesley Muhammad. When Dr. Wesley Muhammad presents any information, I listen, right? Because I look at my brother as an elder, if you will, not older, elder, right? And I was asking him, how do you pick your subjects? And I think the most important part that he articulated to me is the fact that he's not looking to write a book, but when he can contribute something new, right? And not just regurgitate something that's already been there for the point of. So I wanted to get into this because there's so much narrative that is consistent around this, but nobody points out Arabia. Nobody looks at it as a black civilization. Most people look at it as a ancient alien, but in the sense that these are grays, in the sense that these are reptiles or whatever their imagination plays it as. Nobody looks at this as a black civilization. So I want to first start right there of how do you begin to make the bold assertion and claim that this is an ancient black civilization, right? Versus the narratives that are out there that this civilization doesn't have a particular color, or these are ancient aliens who were giants, right? Or who ascended from a spaceship that came to decode human beings for whatever purpose that they had intended for.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother 19 Keys. First, of course, I'm honored to be back on your show.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
You have a powerful platform and you use it very responsibly. And that's good because that does not go without saying. A lot of powerful platforms that are used recklessly, irresponsibly, but I really appreciate how you use what Allah God has blessed you with. So regarding ancient Sumer, first allow me to say, with all of the narratives that are out there, one, or I would say even the primary problem that has generated this cottage industry of narrative is if somebody is presented a plastic bag full of puzzle pieces, it would be difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to put that puzzle together the way it was presented. Why? Because the pieces were given to you in a plastic bag, absent the puzzle picture. Most researchers, or most subjects, and in particular this subject, since we're talking about ancient Sumer, the Anunnaki, there are so many narratives because people are trying to put pieces together without a reference to the picture box. What is the picture box, Keys? What is the image that helps guide how these pieces of fact and data fit together? The teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad are the picture box. And by starting there, the data, the facts from various fields, we can see clearly how they should fall into place. And so, because his Islam is mathematics, and mathematics is Islam, that means there must be factual consistency. There must be data collection and data consistency. His teachings shine light on any subject. And with the Anunnaki, the problem for me, the reason I felt compelled to write that particular book, the Anunnaki narrative has been, I will use this language, some might object to it, but I will use it anyway, has been hijacked by a particular paradigm, the Sitchin paradigm, the paradigm of Israeli former economist turned Annunaki scholar, Zachariah Sitchin. The whole narrative of the Anunnaki has been dominated by the Sitchin paradigm. His reading of some of the data, not all of it, sometimes his misreading of the data, and sometimes, you said it right, the creative license that he took. And so you have the Sitchin narrative imposed on the Sumerian data, the Anunnaki data, which is misleading. And I am showing in my book, because I believe the data compels us to acknowledge that what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said about the original man, where he began, how he began, who he is, and how he is, that is the light that makes all of the Sumerian data fit unforced. Unforced. See, you can force puzzle pieces that look like they go together, but they don't. So you just you make them fit because you don't know what the right puzzle piece for this section is. The teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is that which shines light on this subject and any subject. So the ancient Sumerians are black. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us that that whole area, Arabia, was the black man's and woman's land. We black people founded that area of the Arabian Peninsula. Sumer, or ancient Mesopotamia, is in the northern section of that peninsula. Western politics divided that peninsula up the way it is right now. So when we say Arabia, we think of Saudi Arabia, to the exclusion of the other nation states that inhabit that peninsula right now. But that whole peninsula is Black Arabia, and Sumer, or Mesopotamia, is on the northern end of ancient Black Arabia. And the population, the archaeological, the evidence of the bones, the human remains of ancient Sumer, human remains of the Sumerians, there were non-Semitic people, and the successor civilization, the Akkadians, who were a Semitic people, they were Black, and they both derived ultimately from the more southerly eastern portion of the Arabian Peninsula. So Black Arabia is at the root of ancient Sumerian or Mesopotamian civilization. Black Arabia is at the root of ancient Kemetic Egyptian civilization. So, in conclusion, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that Arabia is the root of civilization, some of our nationalist family got upset with him. They think he was being anti-African because he moved the root of civilization in their mind out of Africa into the Middle East. No, he did not. Black Arabia was always nothing but the northeastern extension of what is now called Africa. So he told the truth that Black Arabia is the root of Black civilizations, and Sumer is a daughter civilization of Black Arabia.
I can see that. I was looking at a report where it was last year, and they was talking about how Black Iraqis, right, darker skinned Iraqis are finally getting to be seen, right? And because of so much racism, right, and prejudices that exist out there, which happen all across the planet Earth, wherever there's only the lighter representation of people, there's hidden dark figures.
That's right.
Right? And those are the original people.
That's right.
Right? And so when you think about Iraq, you think a very light man.
That's right.
Right? You think about modern Arabians.
Mhm.
You don't think about an African-looking brother such as
Right.
yourself.
That's right.
Which is why it's hard for people to puzzle it together, because the picture has never been depicted darker.
That's right.
So they say, oh, wait a minute, are you rewriting?
Mhm.
Right? No, this is not me rewriting. This is the original writings.
Right.
So I think that darker people across the planet Earth, have all, been stuck under this erasure, right, of Black history. And now what they call, and it's unfortunate, there was this sister named Osu, which is a Nigerian sister, speak about Black platforms doing revisionist history, because we're like, whose history, right, are you speaking on? Because their history needs to be revised.
Absolutely. That's what I said. Revisionist historian from a academic standpoint is not a slur.
Yes, sir.
History as written absolutely must be revised. In most fields that have had an orthodox understanding of that field that has been in place for 50 or 100 years, almost all of those fields are under attack by revisionist historians, sparked by what? An ideological dislike for the orthodox history? No. Sparked by new data. New data forces revision. The fact of the matter is, almost all of the old history was blatantly ideological. That's why most old history is wrong.
Right.
It has to be revised. So when I read them refer to you in the language revisionist, well, wear that as a badge of honor, because in true scholarship, history writing, history revision is absolutely necessary, because data accumulates, paradigms are shifted based on the uncovering of new material, but fundamentally, almost all old history is ideological. It's racist, it's political, it has a non-academic, non-scientific agenda. So in the academy, you can't even cite old sources without qualification, because the presumption is there and justifiably that the old sources didn't really come close. At least those sources did well, but those sources were bogged down by ideology, by agenda. So if we are going to use old sources today, we have to do it with qualification.
Now, first of all, that's a very old sources without qualifications, because I believe we have a whole culture that's based on old sources without qualification.
Absolutely.
Which is why there's so much in-house fighting today.
Yes, sir.
Because there is no scrutiny of truth.
Absolutely.
There's no rigorous process, right, that one can say, well, this is how we came to this conclusion.
Absolutely.
Everything is just an old source.
Absolutely.
Without qualification.
Absolutely.
And people who, cite those sources don't have qualifications themselves.
Absolutely.
To even, determine whether the process that they've gotten to, that you're reading and now sourcing from, was correct or incorrect.
Absolutely.
Again, and not to always give my brother praise, all praise is due to Allah, but the reason that I like sitting with you and speaking with you, because you focus on that scientific process. You focus on that process of scholarship. And we need that more than ever in a world of mis and mal and disinformation, especially in a world of artificial information now.
Yes, sir.
Things, you can artificially generate a picture of something, then artificially generate facts around that. And so multiple people living in multiple worlds based on whatever information that they consumed, right? So having the old school way, I would say, of going through process and determination to get to what is the value of this knowledge that's being presented. What's going to happen is when you go through it, it's going to wipe away so many different sects, so many different texts that people are referring from. And what happens is that people get to a point where it is ideological and it's their belief system. And so they don't want to get rid of their beliefs.
Absolutely.
So therefore, they won't consume the truth
Absolutely.
in a matter to where they can digest the seeds, let it take root, and be like, I vow that this is superior knowledge.
Absolutely.
So we're not fighting on the truths, right? It's a battle of beliefs.
Absolutely. Well said.
Now, I want to get to that. So now we have the current belief in most people's head of who are the Anunnakis, and then we have the Black Anunnakis. So for those who have limited knowledge on the subject and for those who have so-called superior knowledge on the subject, can we lay out a foundation of who are the Anunnakis from the Zachariah and Stitch paradigm, right? And the new paradigm, right? As I'll call this the Wesley paradigm, just for the point of this conversation and maybe for the point of future conversations. So what is the Zachariah Stitch version of the Anunnakis?
Okay. May I start with the true version and then get to
Yes,
what
sir.
I am suggesting is the fabricated version? And it's not the Wesley paradigm. It's the most honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the black man is God.
Yes, sir.
Said whenever you look at a black man, you are looking at God. He presented to us a detailed theogony, the process by which the black man came to be and came to be God. Now, I'm an historian of religion, Brother Keys. That's my training, which means I engage in a historical, critical study of religious traditions and religious texts. And as an historian of religion, I've studied all of the ancient religions, all of the ancient texts. And when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us about this group of gods, he called them the 12 major scientists, the 24 scientists. Those same gods you encounter in the Hebrew Bible as Adat El, council of God, also Elohim, gods, plural. Those same gods that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us about. You encounter them in ancient Kemetic, ancient Egyptian writings, the Pa'ut Neter, the council of the gods. It's the same as the black God. A council, a closed circle of gods that are the rulers, the divine rulers, not just of this planet, but of the universe. We'll get to that shortly. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave us the real, down-to-earth understanding of them. We encounter them in religious poetic language in all of the traditions. So, the Anunnaki is Sumerian, a Sumerian term that does not mean, as Zechariah Sitchin took license to translate, those who from heaven to earth came, because he wants to make them aliens who originated off planet and came to this planet. That's not what the Sumerian or Akkadian variations of that term means. It simply means offspring or bloodline of the god An. Now, what I show A-N, but what I show in my book, Keys, is An, as the Sumerians are likely The Sumerian language likely is rooted in a Niger-Congo language group from West Africa. They migrated to Arabia, indigenized there in Arabia before moving up north and settling in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. That name An, the chief god of the Sumerians, the father of the Anunnaki, that Sumerian word An is a Sumerianization of the global name Allah. An is Allah linguistically and conceptually. So when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says the black man is God and his name is Allah, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says there's a council, there's a circle of gods who rule the cosmos and they collectively are called Allah, that is in total agreement with the data from Sumer or Sumeria. The Anunnaki are the gods derived from An, whose original name is Allah. Now, the word An, the reason we don't hear Allah is because in linguistics, and I had to, in my doctoral work, I was forced to be somewhat of a linguist. My program required that I study 5 languages in order to proceed in the program. I had to learn Arabic, Biblical Hebrew, French, and German, as well as English. And what that did was bathed me in historical linguistics and the science of the evolution of language and seams of semantics. On the god of the Anunnaki, the divine wellspring of the Anunnaki that everybody is talking about. The term, the name An, its original phonetics was ALA, pronounced ALA, but written AL. The L, through a linguistic process called nasalization, the L became an N. So from Al, the 2 letters, but pronounce the second letter, it gives that plosive, Allah. But through nasalization, the original L became an N. So we speak of Anu rather than Allah. So, who are the Anunnaki? The Anunnaki are the black gods that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has taught us about, the black gods whose proper name is Allah.
This one got the isolate CBD, the black seed oil, the MCT oil, and the lion's mane powder. I think it's too much in here. I think we need to we gotta calm this product down. We gotta calm this product down. It's too much. It's too much. Bro, I took this and I was going all day. Ain't nobody got that much work to get done in a day where they need to be taking Supermind. Like, what if you a house mom and all of a sudden you get everything done in one day and you ain't got nothing to do the rest of the week? I took this, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. I feel like I done got everything done. I was up, right. I ain't gonna lie, I feel like I changed the world 1,000 times on this. I done figured out every single plan. The next thing I need to have is patience, because I done planned everything. I done did everything I could do in a day. I'm serious. Like, I think we put too much in here. We need to cut down the ingredient list, and we need to make this regular mind, because this is like Viagra for the brain. What is nasalization as far as the process of going from AL to AN? Like, what is that process?
So
to understand?
There's certain letters that are called liquid.
Mm-hmm.
The liquid letters, because they're malleable, they easily change among themselves. Though the key liquid letters are L, R, and N. And I engaged in a significant and I think very productive scholarly debate with a scholar because in my book, Black Arabia and the African Origin of Islam, I proposed that the Egyptian Ra, the Egyptian sun god Ra, is an Egyptianization of the original Arabian god Allah from the same process because R is a liquid letter. The same process that transformed Allah into An in Sumer transformed Allah into Ra in Egypt. The L, when the L changes to a R, it's a process called rotization. When an R or an N transforms into a L, that's called lateralization. It becomes a lateral, an L. When an L or an R transforms into an N, that's called nasalization. And of course, there's certain other phonetic or linguistic circumstances that would force such a change, right? That would force an L in Arabia to become an R in ancient Egypt, or an L in Arabia to become an N in West Africa or in Sumeria. So this is the linguistic process that has hid the name Allah, which is the universal name of God across the black world. Nkulunkulu. We speak of the Zulus. The Zulus of South Africa, a very powerful black nation, especially the pre-colonial Zulus. Their chief god, Nkulunkulu. Allah, we are reminding black people of the God that the whole black world acknowledged before circumstance, the Tower of Babel, confused the languages. And so Allah changed into very different words. My last thought is, so I hear people claiming Anunnaki, and by claiming Anunnaki, that's supposed to represent some greater enlightenment, and then have a whole bunch of negative stuff to say about us religious people talking about Allah and Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You not religious. You don't talk about Allah. You enlightened. You talk about Anunnaki. See, that person needs some revision of his or her thinking, because what you don't know by citing the Anunnaki, you are ipso facto praising Allah. So who's the real enlightened one? The one who went straight to it without the confusion. Allah is God, and he was God in Sumer, he was God in Kemet, he was God, the black God, all across the world. That's the Anunnaki. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gives us the key to unlock all of those mysteries. Now, you're asking about the fabricated, so that's a true.
Before we get to the fabricated, because you brought up some very interesting points. One episode, I'm going to definitely have to just dive into, the phonetics and the linguistic investigation into things, because I think that gets into a good subject. Same way we look at, Jesus and Yahweh, right? But when you look at, people mispronounce words on purpose, or a lot of times because it's more comfortable for them to do so.
Right.
There's Negroes in places right now allowing people to misinterpret their name or pronounce their name because it's easier for them to do so.
Right.
And so it sounds more of an assimilatory process, right? That gets carried over to where in this culture, because it's easier for us to enunciate it, right? Then we're going to speak it in its true words. Like I meet people all the time and they tell me their name and they'll be happy with a close variation of it.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I want to say it right. And so I'm trying to get into people's mind how you can understand the process of how words and vowels and different things change as they're taken on by different people, and how it's easier for them to pronounce that. And so then when they're explaining it to someone else, they're going on with that assimilated, translated version of it. And then that becomes the context in which people view this new word or this truth, right? Going from an owl to an un or a ra, right? Or a Yahweh to a Jesus, right? So I want people to kind of think about their own experiences with that and how words get changed. And we're talking about over regions, right? As a word travels, right? From different cultures and different places, and how they would have to pronounce that.
And in time.
Right. And not having always the tools to decipher different languages. So if their language is different, then they're going to find a way to say it, to try to extract, right, that same consonant and construct the vowel, but in their way. That makes it especially easier. You're not going to go for the harder deciphering. You're going to go for the easiest translation so that you can enunciate it. And, even though Allah, right, is very easy, right, but you have to have a certain level of understanding of language across time and how people carry over different words.
Absolutely.
Which is something I want people to get into their minds, because we're talking a lot about root knowledge here and root understanding of things.
Root knowledge, very important.
Right.
Word and concept.
So now, to me, this challenge is the root knowledge and understanding of God, right? And it's funny because as people deal with Anunnaki, they are challenging every other aspect of religious texts, right? And then all of a sudden they get a belief that they now have this superior knowledge and that everything else, right, is a version of this particular history, right? So we go to ancient Kemet, we go to all these different places and they say, well, this is just a story depicting this all over again, right? So that's why I find this Anunnaki conversation is so important, because when you get to the root and it's saying that, no, we're not changing anything, right? We're reverting it back to its original form. And we're telling you that pass through all of this language, all of this context, all these assimilated versions and changes, here was the root of it.
Absolutely.
And your thesis and after you give us the Zechariah and Stitch version, and I'm kind of jumping over, but it's on my mind, I want to go into the root word of black. I want to go into the root word of, even though we just went into the root word of God, but let's go into the root word of man. Because the thesis of, the root thesis coming from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the black man is God. So I want to go into that understanding after we get to this history.
Great. That's going to be a very fruitful part of the discussion. So I won't tarry too long on the falsehood. We want to stay with truth as long as we can, but it is necessary to draw and point out the distinction.
Yes, sir.
Now, you earlier said something very important I would like to highlight. We get very protective toward the people we like. Much of what passes as scholarship, unfortunately, and especially with us, is really ideology. So, if we offer a factual correction to a scholar beloved by many, we are considered blasphemous. When I wrote Black Arabia and the African Origin of Islam, as an academic, I had to take to task Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, Dr. Chancellor Williams, and Dr. John Henry Clark. Of course, this is the pantheon of Black studies. And I am a student of theirs. I love them. I sucked from their output, but where they were wrong, where their material was dated in terms of Islam, the origin of Islam, I offered a respectful correction, but I was considered as an cultural apostate. I was guilty of cultural treason. Why? Because I dared to say these great scholars did a wonderful work, but here, and here, they were wrong and dated. But we did it because it has to be done. Zachariah Sitchin, because his paradigm has been made dominant in a U.S. government intelligence apparatus, helped to make the Zachariah Sitchin paradigm dominant. His narrative served the disinformation objectives of the U.S. government. So it's dominant. But a lot of people are emotionally wedded to his thesis. And this thesis, there's some good in it. There's white supremacy in it. And there's simple bad scholarship in it, and there's great scholarship in it. He, Zachariah Sitchin, wants us to believe, and those who follow him do believe and insist that the Annunaki aren't black gods from Arabia, which they are. That they are, in fact, alien beings from an exoplanet, a planet outside of the solar system, and these beings, and you get a whole spectrum of depictions of Zachariah Sitchin's Anunnaki. You got them as blue with beaks. You got them as white. That's the most dominant depiction. The movie Prometheus solidified the image of Zachariah Sitchin's Anunnaki as white-skinned, blue-eyed extraterrestrials. That movie was based on the Sitchin paradigm of the Anunnaki. So you see the Anunnaki as white skin, you will see them as blue skin or red skin. You won't see them until just recently, since I have been beating this drum. You never saw them as black skinned gods. They're doing that now because we kicked in the door with this. But you would never see the Anunnaki in their true color as black-skinned gods. And that's not me, that's not religion talking. The texts are very clear. On the father of the Anunnaki, he was represented in a very particular way as a black bull, because the black bull symbolized the most dominant of the gods. And the reason the bull had to be black is because the hide, the black hide of the bull represented the black skin of the god An. And so it was the black Kiskano tree. The Kiskano tree, an ancient Sumerian tree, it came in many colors, and in particular, there's a black version, there was a gray version, there was a brown version of the tree, but the Sumerian texts are very clear. It's the black Kiskano tree, the tree with the black bark that represents the god, because the black bark of the tree, like the black hide of the bull, represents the black skin of the god. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said the gods were black, and that is what the Sumerian texts and the Akkadian texts and even the Assyrian texts, a very important chapter in that the Assyrians and the Babylonians are the white heirs in Mesopotamia of the black Sumerians and black Akkadians. The white the white Assyrians and the white Babylonians, when they invaded that area, they engaged in a very important ritual, state ritual, in which the Assyrian, which was a reenactment of the white god of the Assyrians, Bel, how he killed and conquered the black god of the Sumerians and Akkadians. And in this ritual reenactment of this war of the gods, the white god Bel or Asar versus the black god An, in the ritual reenactment, they brought in a black bull, and the ritual requirements are very clear. The bull that's chosen for this reenactment had to be black as pitch. The ritual professionals had to examine the bull to make sure there is not so much as 7 white hairs on his hide. And during the ritual, the Assyrian ritual, the pitch black bull is slaughtered. His heart is torn out and thrown against the wall. He is flayed. His skin is flayed, and a drum is made from the skin, and the skin is bleached white. And the ritual texts say that the slaughtered bull, black as asphalt, black as pitch, is the god Anu, and his sons, the Annunaki, who were slaughtered by the god Assyria, the god Bel. So the blackness of the Anunnaki is critical to the civilizational development that took place there. The Assyrians and the Babylonians knew, as well as the Sumerians and the Akkadians, that these gods are black. It's just the modern students of Zechariah 6 who don't know or didn't know until we pointed it out to them. They did not come from, Sitchin says they come from heaven to earth. So he mistranslates the term Anunnaki because he wants to make them extraterrestrial. Everybody is robbing the black man of earth from all of our birthrights. White people are much more comfortable. As soon as they are confronted with the reality of us, they instinctively take it off planet. Zechariah Sitchin is a party to that deception. I don't know his motives. I don't know if his upbringing in Israel had any role in that. But his paradigm is wrong. His paradigm, the Atra Hashis, the Sumerian text, I've heard students of his cite the Atra Hashish, a creation text of the ancient Sumerians, cite this text as evidence, and they import into the text claims of Zechariah Sitchin, a reference to a Mars breakaway planet. That's nowhere in these texts. I got several versions, several editions of these texts, and they're nowhere to be found. What's amazing to me is the liberty that we so casually take with this material, as if there's nobody in real life who got this stuff in their library. It really amazes me, the liberties that we take with this material. So when we actually put eyes on the material, if you knew the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you will instantly see the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad there. And you will see how these teachings shed light on this material. But if you are too enlightened, if you are unaware of the teachings, then it's easy to enter these rabbit holes and get tripped up and get lost.
So when he spoke upon the breakaway planet of the Mars, and I see sometimes people speak on that as they believe that it's these planets coming back around and Annunaki is being stuck, but when it gets close enough, they will hop back over here.
Yeah, that ain't nowhere in the material. I'm going to say that emphatically and challenge those who make that claim. Show that in any of the Sumerian texts. That ain't in Atra Hashish.
So what about the gold in being used in the particle to ionize it so that their atmosphere is similar to ours, right? But what you assert in your documentation is that they had the same atmosphere as us because they were human.
Yes. When you say they who?
The Anunnakis.
Yes, because they are human. Now, let's talk about Mars. There is a civilization on Mars. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us of the civilization on Mars and the people, the black people of Mars. They did not originate here and go there. We, the black gods of Asia, planet Earth, we planted them there. We genetically engineered them there. We are the father of all life in the universe. But the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, Brother Keys, that Allah, God, showed forth his power by creating 9 planets, each in their own sphere, and none of the 9 planets are made from the same material. When he created the second planet, he did not take material from the first planet to do it. All 9 planets, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, are made from different matter. All 9 planets have different size, different color. He said that this was how Allah showed forth his power. They could create 9 planets in their own independent spheres and not have to rely on any previous planet. He said the civilizations of these planets are independent and different now regarding Mars. He said the people on Mars are similar in some respects to us on Earth. They are black. They are taller than us. He said they are a bit taller and skinnier than a black man and woman on Earth. They are similar to us, but the Martian atmosphere was created so distinct from Earth's atmosphere. Biologically, there can be no cross-pollination, if you will. No black Martian can come to Earth and exist in this environment. No black man from Earth can go to Mars and exist in that atmosphere or any of the 9 planets. Each planet Allah made it independent and hermetically sealed in a sense. We can interact, but we can't exist there. We talk about terraforming, but ain't no terraforming occurred. Certainly not at the level where there can be cultural exchanges, biological exchanges between the planets. So there is civilization on Mars. What my point is, not that there is not a civilization on Mars. My point is we are wrong to point to ancient Sumerian texts to say that that civilization originated from Anunnaki fleeing from Earth, having originally come to Earth from Nibiru. All of that is fancy. It is not. All of that is fiction fancy. And the students have embellished that. And that's fine. But call it what it is, creative writing. It's not authenticated by the text. It's a paradigm that white people enjoy.
Did Zachariah Stitchin wasn't the first to interpret it? Did the people who interpreted before him have similar findings?
No, Sitchin paradigm, absolutely not. And Sumerologists, actual scholars of ancient Sumer, from the beginning have been dismissing Sitchin's narrative from the beginning. It is not, let me be real clear, it's not that everything in his overall, his body of work is foundationless. That's not the case. It's not. There are aspects of his work that's very consistent with the data, and that's fine. But the crux of the Sitchin paradigm, his presentation of the Anunnaki, is very wrong. And it is in large measure totally unsupported by the Sumerian material. License was taken. And so those who are wedded to his paradigm, while they would refer or reference the text, they can't show in those texts what they claim to be referencing.
So the main claims that he have, right, is the Anunnaki origin, the genetic engineering, the gold mining, and the planet Nibiru. So, number one, he says that is the 12th planet. So that is incorrect?
So I don't know if there is an exoplanet. The fact of the matter is, I would assume that there's many exoplanets.
Right.
There's
But
many
he claims
planets.
that to be the home of the...
That's where, see, so that's where he is in error. Not, so you asked me about the 12th planet.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say he's wrong that there is a 12th planet.
Yes,
He is wrong by saying the ancient Sumerian texts posit the origin of the Anunnaki on that 12th planet. That he is wrong.
And so... I just want to go through these. Gold mining, according to Stitchin, is a primary reason for the Anunnaki
And that's
presence.
nowhere in the text. There's no mention. You can do all of the Mesopotamian literature is available and accessible online, and you can search the literature for keywords, and nowhere will you find a reference in the literature of Anunnaki looking for gold. That is nowhere in the literature. But of course, This is important to his overall narrative. This is supposedly the reason the Anunnaki had to leave their home planet, Nibiru, the exoplanet. They came looking for gold. They found it on Earth. They landed on Earth. And for some Africans, eventually found, well, the Anunnaki were forced to mine the gold in Africa, the lower Anunnaki. But they got tired. So they found an ape man, a hominid in Southern Africa, touched him up and produced, what a jump, white humanity. Because all of the books and depictions of that moment of the Anunnaki creating humans, they have this white Adam. And Zechariah Sitchin said, yeah, they created us. He's talking to, interviewed by a white woman, said, yeah, they created us, not us. So you got this African hominid that these extraterrestrial gods, I don't know, blue, green, everything but black, genetically manipulated this African hominid, and produced this white Adam. See, now, of course, there is no reference in Atra Hashish that is at the root of this narrative. Atra Hashish, the Mesopotamian text, does depict the Anunnaki creating man but they slayed a god. And the Mesopotamian texts say the name of the god responsible for this was Allah, and his gods who rebelled against the other Anunnaki, and from whose blood the new man was made, the Lulu was made, that God and those gods, they were Allah gods. So a group of Allah gods, and the leader of the group was a rebel. The rest of the Anunnaki considered the leader of that group a rebel. They mutinied against the greater gods. The greater gods killed that Allah, the leader, and the Allah gods, and from their blood. And then it says they took something, it doesn't say what it was, took something, mixed it with the blood, and that's what was used to produce Lulu, the primitive man. Nowhere is there a suggestion that it's a hominid that was used. No, it was the blood of these Allah gods. They mutinied against the greater gods and were slaughtered. And from their blood, the primitive worker was made. And it is true that primitive worker, that creation, was the white man 6,000 years ago. Because the texts say that not only the blood of the rebel god called Allah and his Allah gods was made to produce the physical physiology of this new man, but the spirit and mind, the rebellious mind of that rebel god was put into the new creation, the new man. So the new man personifies the rebellious spirit, the rebellion against God's spirit was put in the new man. So it's okay, Mr. Sitchin, to point to your people as that to which the text refer, but get the narrative right. The narrative is these black gods, a group of black gods rebelled against the hierarchy of the gods. And those black gods were Allah gods. And the rebel who led that rebellion. His blood and his rebellious spirit was used to make the new people. And that is absolutely the white man, his spirit of rebellion. He is the personification, the physical incarnation of that spirit of rebellion against the black God. Which is why, of course, the Assyrians ritualized their not just rebellion, but their war against and slaughter of not just the lowly black gods, but the king of the gods, An or Allah himself.
So I want to get into, well, I guess you properly, I think, explain black, right? And especially in the terms. There's a lot of debate about the word black, right? From a legal standpoint, right? And then I guess from a descriptive one, right? So as we use the word black, first, when did the word black come into origin? Do you know?
I do not. I don't know that is. Before we leave, Annunaki, can I say something? You know, this conversation, the last time I was honored to be on your platform.
Yes, sir.
We had a very high level conversation about the circle of gods called the 12 major signs.
Mm-hmm.
And in that conversation, I made a reference to the Shura Executive Council of the Nation of Islam, on which I and 11 of my brothers and sisters are blessed to sit, all of us, of course, believers in the Nation of Islam. The Shura Executive Council is the governing body, for those most don't know. It's the governing body of the Nation of Islam under the divine direction and guidance of the Honorable Brother Minister Farrakhan. He personally selected each of us to be on that council. I would like, if I may, to
Yes, sir.
Offer some context, some clarity, and even some correction to my words, if you don't mind.
Not at all. I wanted to get into that anyway.
First, context. The teachings of Master Fard Muhammad, Allah in a person. The teachings that he brought and the life that he requires of us. Their aim is to make those of us who follow the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, make us into gods equal to the 12 gods of the East. Their replacement, the replacement of those gods of the East, is coming up out of the black man and woman of the West, of America. That is our destiny. Now, the process to transform the so-called Negro, probably the lowliest human creation or human creature ever produced. I didn't say the black man, I said the so-called Negro in America. Probably the lowliest human creature produced. The process of transforming him, us, into the greatest gods that ever lived, equal to the scientists of the East. That process is a long process. It's a generational process. Of course, you have to be in it to win it. We have to be in the process to achieve the reward of the process. My words, if we stay in the process, those of us who stay in the process, stay in the classroom of God, we each help push Black people closer to that ultimate goal of being transformed into the greatest gods on the earth. It's a very long process. My words last time I was blessed to be on your show, I could have, I think, given the wrong impression that those of us on the council are further more advanced in this process than we actually are.
Yes, sir.
You know? And I should disabuse us of that wrong impression. The brothers and sisters of the Shura Executive Council, we just come up out of the mud. We are not of the generation that has achieved that summum bonum, they used to say in Egypt. That grade is good, that ultimate goal. When we deliberate, we gather to deliberate over the important affairs of the Nation of Islam. But we don't gather to get up the history of the world for the next 25,000 years. Those gods do. We don't do that because we can't do that. And of course, that would go without saying, but in this case, it should be said or reiterated. But in the future, Black men and women from America will have that ability, will have the power of the greatest gods. That's just not us today. So, my words the last time may have been a bit misleading. And in the Nation of Islam, mistakes shall not exist among the laborers of Islam. Not that mistakes aren't made, they are every day. But when we make a mistake, we correct it. That is the culture of Islam as taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I wanted to do that.
Yes, sir.
To correct my words that gave a misleading impression of myself, maybe, and those of us who constitute the Executive Council today, the Shura Executive Council today. But of course, my mind was on the brothers and sisters of tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Who will have the divine status to replace the old gods, but we have not achieved that yet. So I wanted to clarify that, and thank you for allowing me to do so.
It's actually a very beautiful thought once you think about it. Because when you talk about bloodlines, right, and what's needed for there to be a generation, right, that makes, quite frankly, everything that we've been through worth it. Because and when you think about planning 25,000 years, you then have to think about these cycles, right? Because as you were saying that, I was thinking like, wow, what does it take to actually plan for 25,000 years? Right. And one can only think in cosmic cycles to get to those points, right? At the highest level. But the way that you described it, as the greatest good, right? That to me has me thinking about the cleanest generation to ever be in existence. And the requirements out of that, where I can see as we living in present day, we couldn't claim it because the DNA, right, is the claim itself. And if we still working to clean out our DNA, right, from our inheritance from our mother and our father and the grandparents and grandparents and so on and so
The
forth.
epigenetic inheritance.
Exactly. Then we couldn't, regardless of how exalted we become in life or how clean we become in life, we still aren't the generation.
That is right.
That is the representation of the
That is
complete
right.
existence of that.
That is correct.
So the beauty of it, of having the responsibility to create a future generation, right, that is a representation of us cleaning out ourselves, purifying our DNA, installing, right? Because we talk about, genetically engineering, but the way you genetically engineer, right, a people is first cleaning yourself.
That's
and
right.
giving them the knowledge of self in the world. So when they're born, well, they're born more intelligent.
That's
They're
right.
born with a higher moral code. They're born with divine righteousness.
That's right.
They're born with the codes of their mother and their father. So their epigenetic inheritance is already a divine right.
Absolutely.
That was sold into them through your actions.
Absolutely.
So it actually makes it more beautiful because then we think about, the dominance of time, right? Rather than the dominance of space, right? And saying that your works are always more than you. Right? Because you're dominating time more righteous that you are. So that if you have generations, because within my own family, I can see the seeds of karma that come from, bad genetic inheritance, right? So many things that we have to clean from ourselves, right? And whether it's mental issues, whether it's drug use, right? Whatever it may be, there's a lot of work that has to be done. You may deal with just your environment and the issues and problems that you have, and maybe you've mentally, been able to exceed those issues, but now you have to deal with your inherited issues.
You know what comes to mind? You raised such an important concept, which brings to mind the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's self-description, description of himself as Yaqub in reverse. What does that mean? What you just described was the necessity for us to have a righteous eugenics project.
Yes, sir.
To counter the dysgenics project that this world has Black people trapped in. We have to distinguish those two words and concepts. White folks don't have a eugenics plan for Black people. They have been operating off of a eugenics plan for themselves. White people have a dysgenics plan and have been operating and have had us trapped in a dysgenics plan. Now, of course, what is dysgenics? Eugenics, of course, is selective breeding to enhance positive traits, to breed in a superior human being by selecting for positive traits. Dysgenics is the opposite. It's the selective breeding to enhance negative degenerate traits to produce a degenerate human being. The only eugenics plan they had for Black people is sterilization and abortion. Just kill Black babies. Don't let them come into being so those Black babies won't interfere with my white bloodline that I am eugenically enhancing. For us, they put us in environmental circumstances, waging war by zip code, trapped us in environments. The whole landscape is poison. The air is poison. The water that's directed, that's funneled to our zip code is poison. The food that is funneled to our zip code is poison. So all this poisoning and the teaching of sexuality to us in a way that does not give birth to gods, but give birth to savages and beasts. This is a trap that they deliberately put us in as part of their dysgenics project. So they want us, they legalizing marijuana, this weaponized marijuana state by state, and they're encouraging us to go ahead and partake, knowing what it is doing, not just diminishing the sperm count, but how it's changing the quality of our sperm. And by diminishing the quality of the sperm, you are diminishing the quality of the human being that will be produced from that sperm. That's dysgenics. We have been trapped in a dysgenics project. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is Yaqub in reverse. See, white people were created via a dysgenics project. Yaqub and the gods that grafted white people. He focused on the weak, wicked, deficient part of the original man and enhanced that, producing the Caucasian race. Yaqub's was a dysgenics project. They were produced from a dysgenics project. And so it was very poetic. They knew what they were doing when they trapped us in a dysgenics project. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said he's Yaqub in reverse, because the original Yaqub, dysgenics. This Yaqub, eugenics for the black man and woman of America. The lifestyle that God requires of us, that he represents to us, is a lifestyle to do exactly what you said. It's going to purify us. Over generations, the bad traits that were bred in the so-called Negro, it's going to be bred out. The negativity that was grafted in the so-called Negro will be grafted out by this process, by this lifestyle. And so eventually a generation will be produced. It will be pure like that. And that generation would not only rival the gods of the East, but replace the gods of the East. For at that point, the sun would truly have risen in the West and outshine the sun of the East.
When I think about that, just that idea within itself and how intentional we would have to be when it comes to breeding. And the bigger issues that we face in society.
It's very important to be intentional with breeding.
Very intentional. But we're very unintentional.
We're very
today
unintentional
when it comes to breeding.
all us accidents, right?
So you think about, you gear up a son and a daughter, and they're geniuses. I mean, you raise them to be so godly, and then they make a choice of being with someone who is not their match, right? And so now, in a sense of a way, that they are mating with somebody, right, who is not a genetic match for that godly breed. But the level of intentionality is not at that depth where we're
Right.
thinking,
Right.
do we pair, right? And do we match at a genetic level, right? What is your bloodline? What is my child going to inherit? What psychological issues, right? And I
That's how
think
the
that,
gods breathe.
yes, and this is the thinking that we would have to get into if we were to be a more serious people,
Absolutely.
right? And
Absolutely.
if we're thinking and begin to thinking, because this is at least 50 years ahead, 100 years thinking.
But that's the teaching of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
He taught us selective breeding. Thus, the honorable brother Minister Farrakhan produced the series, How to Give Birth to a God.
That's what my
The
mother was
point
listening to. She
is,
had me.
the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad and the lifestyle required of us is the prescription for exactly what you are outlining.
Yes, sir. The science of mating.
The science of mating.
My mother was, she tells me all the time, that's what she was listening to when she had me.
It's no,
You know.
not hard. We get it. We see it.
Yes, sir.
We get it.
I want more people to get it because, you know, the Nation of Islam has an impeccable track record, right, of raising gods. You know, and I want to start right there, gods. First, we start with singular God, right? What is the meaning of God? Oftentimes, when we have these conversations with people around the world, I always stop them when they ask me questions. Are you a Muslim? What does God mean? First, I have to know what your definition of it is, because I'm not sure we haven't.
What exactly are you asking me?
Exactly. Because most people are constructing their reality around connotations and not definitions.
Absolutely.
So it has to be defined for us to be having the same conversation.
Absolutely.
So I want to establish the baseline, right?
Appropriate.
Starting off with, what is God?
Yes, sir. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave us the definition of a God. A God is a being of power and force. God, the supreme being, is that one who has supreme power and supreme force. Now, scientifically, power and force are not synonymous. A God who has supreme power and force, scientifically, when you break down the words mean it's the being who can impose its will on the world around him, and nothing in the world around him can frustrate his will. He's an action that can be done that no reaction can frustrate. That's God, a being of power and force, and the supreme being is that one who can impose his will, exercise his will anywhere in the universe, and nothing in the universe can obstruct, oppose, or frustrate his will, because they don't have the power to do so. That's God. Now note that the definition of God as given by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, a being of power and force, it did not come with adjectives such as good or bad. Because the devil is a god. He's a being of power and force. In fact, he's the god of this world. But he uses his power and force toward wicked aims. That's what makes him devil. If he used his power and force toward righteous ends, then he would not be a devil. He would be a righteous God, but he was not created of such nature. So that's the definition of God that I operate with.
Now, what about the small g, plural, when it comes to gods, right? Because when a person hears you call yourself a god, they believe that you're exalting yourself on his throne and saying that I am the creator of all of the worlds. So when you call yourself a god, what do you mean?
Yeah. So I've written about what I call, or what has been called, the divine hierarchy. There's a hierarchy within the divine. All gods ain't created equal.
Yes, sir.
So the signature, essential proof text of this concept is Psalms 82. Ye are all gods. Important, but that's just the first part. Ye are all gods, children of the Most High God. All gods ain't created equal, but all are God. So there's a hierarchy within divinity. So just in this room, as I look around, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm in the room. There are 8 bona fide gods in this room. All of us don't have the same power and force.
Yes, sir.
All of us have a power that the rest of us ain't got.
Mm.
So I use the language as we use the Black God Protocol.
Yes, sir.
So there is a sphere in which, in this room, I'm the Most High God.
Mm.
There is a sphere in which, in this room, you're the Most High God, or you're the Most High God, or you're the Most High God, or at least a higher God
Yes, sir.
than the rest of us in